Creative Constitution podcast. My name is Deborah Tamai, and today I'm joined by a very special guest called George Siegal, who's a documentary filmmaker, a presenter, and so many other great things. Hello, George. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Deborah. Thanks so much for having me on. Great to be here.
I'm super pumped. Today's episode is going to be so cool. We're talking about documentary filmmaking and where to get started as a documentary filmmaker. So tell us a little bit about yourself, George.
Well, I actually started in front of the camera when I got out of school. I graduated from UCLA and I was in television news. I was a weatherman, a morning show host. I made a game show pilot. I was a sports anchor for a while, did a bunch of things. And when I got out of the business, I started my own video production company, and I would make marketing videos and sales videos for clients. And I tried to create some TV programs. That's very hard for a small independent company to get much traction with that. And then I said, well, a great way to tell stories is through documentary films. So I have 2 of them under my belt now, and I'm working on 2 more. I have 2 more in the works we can talk about. So, it's a lot of fun. It's a very challenging thing to do, but it's very rewarding.
That's amazing.
Not financially, but just emotionally.
What got you into documentary filmmaking in the first place?
Well, it just seemed like a great way to tell stories. It's a long form way of telling a story. And I'm motivated by documentaries that I've seen that I think have an agenda. And I try to make films that don't. I mean, it's not about what my opinion is. It's about a story that I think is good. And then I want to tell that story to hopefully motivate some kind of action to make a difference.
Yeah. Your first documentary, that was the one about natural disasters and housing. Am I correct?
That was the second one. The first one was actually about parenting. It's called License to Parent.
Oh,
and
cool.
It was about the parenting problem in this country. I wanted to expose how, parenting is the most important job in the world. It's a thankless job a lot of the times, but it's important, and we let anybody do it.
Wow,
and I think that poses some challenges.
For sure. So walk me through because you've had such an amazing career with so many different, essentially, parts of the business where you've sort of started. What got you into making your own documentaries and sort of taking that more directing role when you were sort of, I guess, comfortable maybe in front of the camera?
Well, it's hard to find jobs where you just get hired to do that unless you're part of a crew working for somebody else. So I like to take my ideas and bring them forward. And when you're a small company, if you're the director, you're the producer, you're the writer, your imprint is all over that thing. Mm-hmm. So there's no 2 ways about it. And I like that. One of the things I didn't like about TV news is the dance they made everybody do and a lot of the BS you had to put up with.
Yeah, it's a bit of a puppet show, isn't it?
It is. It's a very phony business in the sense that they have people on and they make it seem like to the audience, these people are part of your family until they don't want you around anymore, and then they boot you out. And that's not very family oriented. But so I like working for myself. It does pose a huge challenge, though, because any project you do, you have to come up with the money. And that's the great equalizer of ideas. I've always felt I was a guy with a lot of ideas, but getting the money to do those ideas is a completely different story.
That's right. I mean, even for narrative, which is pretty much where I focus, finding the budget's always a tough thing. So you usually end up forking it out of your own pocket. But with documentaries, I personally don't know that much about it, so I'd love to hear your opinion on sort of what is the sort of budget requirement for your parenting documentary. What are we talking here? Did it take a lot of resources? What did that look like?
It depends on what you want to do with it. I mean, if you have a great story and it's all right there and you can do something with it, it can help keep the cost down. But if you have to go different places, you have to go to different locations to shoot it, and you want to have 4K cameras, and you want to have good editing, and you want to have licensed music, and then you want to have a voiceover talent for it. All those things can add up. And so if the pieces all fall for you, let's say you're a young person starting out, it may fall together for you where somebody says, hey, I'll be the talent in your film for free. Yeah. I'll shoot it and I'll work because I want to cut my chops on this. When you're an older person like me, nobody wants to work for free. They want to be paid top dollar. And so it's going to be a more professional setting, but you got to have the money for it. And that is what is extremely challenging. And I would say that's what's kept me from doing some of the things I want, because it's not easy to raise money. I have two films I'm raising money for right now, and I think they're really solid ideas, but that doesn't mean that somebody else is going to go, I love it, here's a check, and they're two different models. One is where people contribute to the film because they care about the cause and they want to advance it, so their name is attached to it and they're part of it, but we're not going to make money with it unless we sell it to Netflix or Amazon. The goal is to get it out there in front of people. My other film, I have a business plan I'm circulating around. It shows people the path that they can make money if they invest in the film. But as you probably talk about a lot, in any kind of film venture, you also have to sign something saying you realize it's a big risk.
Yeah.
Hey, I there's no guarantee on this. I could lose all my money. Want to make sure you're a smart, advised investor, because it is a risky investment. Now, I would say it's a better investment than the stock market is right now. And if it's a small company making a film, you have a better chance of getting money and making money, because if I have a small budget and sell my film, you'll get your money back. If I'm making a $50 million film and then I have all these back end costs and marketing and talent to pay, I could hide that so you never see a dime.
Yeah,
And
that's
I don't
true.
know that business that well, so I don't want to throw shade on it or anything, because I love watching movies and I respect what they do. I'm just saying, from a small perspective, I can show you a path how we can make money.
Yeah. When you're talking to investors and bringing your ideas forward, have you had a different sort of vibe from the investors, if it's a social cause-based documentary versus something that is maybe a little bit more fiction-ish? What I'm saying is there's not really a social cause attached to it, perhaps?
Well, I've only done ones where I think there is a cause, so I don't know otherwise. I would say the difference, though, is when you approach somebody to be content and you want, hey, you want to sponsor this because if you could, this will help your company when it's out there. So, for example, one of the films I'm doing now is Built to Last, Buyer Beware. It's kind of an extension of The Last House Standing that I made, but it's about how building codes are kept low, houses are poorly built, and we really have no idea. So there's a lot of organizations that care about that and want to advance that story, and they're contributing to the budget for the film. My other film is called American Dysfunction, A Picture is an Illusion, and it's about how families are falling apart in this country, how 96% of families are dysfunctional. There's all kinds of problems with that family unit, and how can we hold that together? How can we keep that together? Because it's very important, and I think when we lose that, you have a lot of people aimlessly going about, and it creates a lot of the problems that we have in this country right now. So that film, I have a business plan that's out. So when I'm talking to somebody, I say, look, if you invest X, you can make Y. Here's what we're trying to do. When I go with the other film, Built to Last, Buyer Beware, I'm saying, let's get this story out there because it's important and your business benefits from it because you're a good builder, or you're an insurance company, or you're a nonprofit that cares about environment and climate change. So it's all different. They're two different approaches, but they're both challenging.
Sounds like the brands that want to get involved, they like it because of sort of brand reputation. That seems, from what I'm hearing, seems to be one of the great, bring a pitch forward to a company and sort of show them in a good light, be part of a great cause and great story that they can bring to their audience as well.
That's the idea. And yet, a lot of times, the people that are the most obvious that you think would be into sponsoring an idea like that don't want anything to do with it. So for my last film, The Last House Standing, and for this film, I've asked people in the insurance industry. I said, this would be a great thing for insurance companies to sponsor, because if houses are better built, you're not paying claims. Wouldn't you want to be the insurance company that leads the way saying, let's build better houses? I can't get the time of day from an insurance company. They don't care. The other industry I've never gotten a nickel out of is the concrete industry. And our film stresses building concrete homes.
Wow.
If there was ever a marriage made in heaven, it's this. And they have money coming out of every opening in their body. I mean, they make so much money and they have so much marketing, but they're not spending it with me. And I think that's a mistake. But, that's just the frustrations of the business. It's like, it's like you meet somebody and you go, gosh, we'd be great together. And the other person looks at you and goes, nah, I don't see that.
Have you ever tried the crowdfunding route?
Yes, I'm doing that with Built to Last. We raised 80% of the money, and I have a crowdfunding campaign up right now on Seed and Spark, because I did Kickstarter one time, and they're all or nothing. If you don't raise 100%, they're not giving you a nickel.
Yeah.
And they also take a bigger percentage. So on Seed and Spark, I have a fundraiser. We're trying to raise $25,000. I just put it up the other day. And what's cool about this is, you give incentives to people to try to get them to do it. So your name can go on our website on this concrete looking wall of fame, like the Grauman's Chinese Theater
Nice.
in LA or in Hollywood, or you can be in the credits of the film. You can get an advanced screening. I mean, a lot of stuff, a digital download of the film, but you can be part of the early focus group of the film. And we're not trying to ask people for a lot of money. It ranges from $10 up to $500 for the different rewards. But crowdfunding is not fun because, I know the guys I went to school with and the guys people I'm friends with in life, when I call them and ask them for money, I just am uncomfortable with that. Yeah. I'm not a really good salesman.
No one really likes to beg.
No, I don't love crowdfunding, but this is a good campaign. So, if people go to movetheworldfilms.org, at the very top of it, movetheworldfilms.org is a link to my crowdfunding campaign, and you can just see it and let me know what you think of it. I mean,
I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, I made a nice little marketing video about it, telling what the film's going to be about. And it takes a while for that to gain some traction, but I'm hoping to just get a lot of people giving a little, because there's so many other things going on in the world. I don't expect somebody to write me a huge check, but for $10, you get a shout out on social media. For $50, your name's in the credits of a film that I'm fairly confident I'm going to get out into some good places. My last film's on Tubi TV. It was on public television. I'm shooting for Amazon or Netflix on this one. And, it can be humiliating and it's humbling when people ignore you and don't want to sponsor your project.
That's so true. Let's take a step back to your documentaries, and they seem to be very sort of similar in theme and story. Story idea, concept, the background of it, now that you've done housing and families. How did you get into that? Like, out of everything, you could have done a documentary about penguins. Why that? What's driving you?
I watched the Penguin documentary and, I think those are beautiful films, and I love the cinematography in those films. And if you get Morgan Freeman to voice it, it's going to be successful. Yeah, it's great. But that's not going to change my life in any meaningful way that I personally am concerned about. I like I say, for anybody watching or listening, I love the penguins, but I want to focus on things that are a little more immediate. So with License to Parent, there's a parenting problem. I wanted to draw attention to it. We need to support parents more. With The Last House Standing, as a homeowner and then being in the media, I've covered disasters where people are just wiped out and lose everything. I've bought houses where they just pulled the wool over my eyes. I didn't do the right homework, and I get something less than what I should have gotten for the money that I paid. Mm-hmm. And I want to wake people up and say, don't just assume this is a transaction where you're getting your dream home and anybody cares about it other than you. And now go into that with your eyes open and ask a million questions. So when the storm blows through, or the wildfire, or the tornado, you're not losing everything. It's your biggest investment. But we care more about our iPhones. We care more about our gym membership, our dating profile, whatever is your passion or concern. But nobody really does the work on their house that they should. And so I wanted to shout that out. And that's what I'm doing with the next film. It's like I was just at a convention in Atlantic City for the New Jersey Association of Floodplain Managers. I was talking to a lot of people there, and they talk about their frustrations with, let's fix up our houses. But, oh, by the way, climate change means sea level rise. So in 50 years, we're all going to be underwater anyway. I mean, you hear so many different things, and there's a million things we have to focus on. So I just try to break it down to solvable basics. What can I do to get the best house possible and protect my family? And that's the focus.
Oh, that's great. Especially when it's usually people's biggest expense ever in their life. And they do almost no due diligence on it at all.
Yeah, and somebody pointed this out to me the other day, and it really highlights the stupidity of the whole process. It's like most builders give you a warranty for a year or two, and then maybe the structure they do 10 years or whatever. but you get a 30-year mortgage.
Mm.
So a year into it, you're on your own pretty
Yeah.
much. And depending on the builder, there's some that are stand-up great builders. And if you have a problem, they'll come running out and fix it. And they're great. And then there's others that'll probably be doing something else in a year, and you're never going to find them again. And so what do you do to put yourself in the best position? But most people, they go in and look at a house and they go, oh, I love the backyard. Oh, the kids will be great here. It's near a school. I can walk to the bar down on the corner. I mean, you think of all the things you love. So you're not inspecting what's behind the walls of that house. How's the roof attached to the walls? How is the crawl space up there? Is it insulated properly? Did they use wood? Did they use concrete? I mean, there's so many things you could look into if you cared, but most people don't. And that just amazes me. You're spending so much money. Why don't you care more?
I think most people just look at the kitchen and whether it's nice and then move on.
Yeah. And, this kind of was an offshoot for, I have a podcast called Homeowners Be Aware. And I try to educate homeowners as to everything you need to know to own a house. And it's the same theme. It's all the same kind of stuff. I have the same guests on. Some of them are going to be in the film because I met them through the podcast. And it's just great information. If you want to own a home, do your homework, ask a million questions, and don't go in half-assed because you're going to end up paying for it.
That's right. Oh, gosh. I can't even imagine not checking the X and O's before buying a house. I just think that's wild. But I guess that's
most people don't know what the
inspired.
ones to ask, but they don't know which of the ones to ask are. Like, for example, this one's amazing. I live in Florida, and they finally made it so there's a form that a seller and a realtor would fill out to show the buyer if the house has ever flooded before. The form exists, but you don't have to show it to them. So my house could have been under 10 feet of water 6 months ago. You're buying my house. If you don't ask for that form, I don't have to give it to you. That's insane.
Wild. That is
and I don't
crazy.
think laws are in place that protect the builder. They protect the construction industry. They're not protecting the consumer. And to me, that's so upsetting. Because if we have a bad experience, I can only go to arbitration with my builder in most states. Well, that sucks. You're not going to get your damages for that. You may get your repairs. I want to be in front of a jury. I want somebody that's so proud of their work, they say, let the jury decide if I built you a piece of crap or not. But you don't get that satisfaction because no builder wants to risk that.
Wow. Well, I guess that's where the passionate filmmaker can come in and save the day, I guess. So when you create something where you drive that home, anyone watching that, would probably be going back and asking for those things maybe and seeing what they could do from it.
You hope so. And I try not to like I say, I have a great deal of cynicism towards construction, but you won't see that in the film because if a builder is in the film, I respect what they're telling me and let people decide if they think that's a good thing or a bad thing. I try not to push my personal feelings into my product because sure, I've had some bad experiences. So I'm going to tell you about them so you don't have bad experiences, but I'm not going to make it seem like construction industry bad, homeowner good. There's some great builders out there. There's some houses that withstand everything. And those people need to be applauded and pointed out and rewarded. And the ones that are crummy need to be singled out and said, hey, this is dangerous.
So true. And with The Last House Standing, how did you go about sort of finding the footage for that? Because there is a lot of footage of natural disasters and examples of houses being destroyed. So how did you sort of go about getting that footage in the first place?
Well, when you're a documentary filmmaker, if you're using short clips of things to advance the story that you're telling, you're allowed to take news clips and clips from other things. You have to give them credit in the film, in the credits especially. But you don't have to pay to license it. There are some shots that are in there that if I got them from a stock footage place or I got them from a videographer that does that for a living, I have to pay a licensing fee to use it. And that's where a lower budget film from a higher budget film, you can really get in trouble because a storm chaser may want $1,000 for 5 seconds of a tornado and he risked his life for it or she risked her life. Hey, that's the market, whatever you can get for it. So we have to find creative ways to get footage. And then we shot a lot of the after the storm footage ourselves with drones and cameras and stuff. So that's the footage that the company now owns. And we got some amazing shots. it's hard right after a disaster to get to some of those places. So there's if you can use news footage or somebody that was there right afterwards, because the last thing a town that's victimized by a disaster needs is every filmmaker in the world showing up to get their story.
Yeah.
And when somebody's just been wiped out or something, I have a hard time sticking a mic in their face unless they want to talk to us.
That's always something I've wondered, which is sort of after something happens, there'd be heaps of people that want to interview or want to create a story out of that. So how do you sort of cut through the noise and get to people that you want to interview?
It's challenging. And so like the gentleman that owned the house in Mexico Beach in The Last House Standing, I reached out to him. I found him through, I think it might have been LinkedIn, or I called him because I found you have to sleuth around to get it. And I was able to talk to him, and he was a terrific guy. And a little time had passed since the disaster. He was going to be at the house when we were there. And he was very gracious in giving us his time, showing us around and talking about it. And it ended up being the central theme of the film. Other people in the film, it took a long time to get. We had the FEMA director on. FEMA does not like to be interviewed by documentary filmmakers, as you might imagine.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. And that's understandable. They have a thankless job. When you're going in after a disaster, nobody's going to be happy. I'm not going to talk about what they do wrong or right, but they're in a tough position. We approached them saying, look, we don't even want to talk to you about how you do on a disaster scene. Our film's about preventing the disaster. So it was a proactive approach. And they said, okay, we'll let you in. But that took over a year to line that up. And
Wow.
even when we did get in there, I would never recommend a young filmmaker. Here's the tip. You're going to be talking to somebody and you give them a release, and they write in the release that they have a right to see what you shot before the film goes out to approve it. You never want to do that, because the person you're talking to may be a total a-hole.
Yeah.
And that's just the way they're going to look in the movie. Would you want to send that to them? Don't give that up. But here I am sitting in the FEMA office with the FEMA director, and they asked for that. I had no choice at that moment.
Oh, gosh.
Because I knew I wasn't asking them controversial things. They were not the gotcha part of the film. They were talking about proactively getting people ready for disasters. There was nothing they would hate based on how we were using it. So that's the only time I've done that, and I will never do it again. But it's just for a young filmmaker, don't give that up. If you want to be able to tell your story, and if somebody else can ruin it for you just because they want to say no or they don't like the way they look, anybody interviewed would. I could say to you, Deborah, I want to see your podcast first before you put it on there to make sure I didn't look like an idiot.
Yeah.
I'm interviewing you. If I come off that way, that's your choice what to do with it. I've kind of assumed that I don't have that right. And if I asked for it, you'd probably tell me no. So you got to be careful.
I try my best to make sure the guests are as nice as possible.
Yeah.
But with sort of the narrative of the documentary, what comes first? Is it the story that you think you're going to tell, or is it the story that comes from the interviews that you get?
I think it's a combination, but more of the second. You can have an outline of where you want to go just from the point of telling a story. Like if I'm going to include 5 different types of disasters, I know I have to go to these different places. But if I was to write the script and then just ask you questions to fill out my script, that's not objective, and that's not a good story. So that part, I think, comes from when you're actually out in the field and you get those interviews and you hear what people say. And that then shapes the narrative. If in the one we're doing now, Built to Last, Buyer Beware, if we truly went out there and they said, look, houses are being so well built right now that nobody has anything to worry about, well, that needs to be the story if that was actually true. We know it's not. But if it was, that's what we would have to tell, and we would have to change what we were doing, saying this is a film letting you know you're okay. I don't think anybody would really want to watch that, but I don't think you can lie at that point. So
That's
yeah,
so
you kind of
true.
want the content to dictate the story.
Have you had sort of challenges with interviewing people where they're sort of not getting to the point of what you're trying to come across? Like they might just sort of be telling you what you want to hear, but not what the audience needs to hear, sort of thing?
I'm pretty good at asking questions to get what I think is interesting out of people. Sometimes you run across somebody who's just not giving you anything. If somebody's talking about their house that has just been wiped out and they lost everything, but they're smiling and happy that particular day. It's not a good look. So you ask them enough questions where you try to get them to relive the moment. Tell us what that was like. What was it like when you went and saw your baby shoes and everything laying out in the yard? And you hope they cry and you hope they have emotion, not to make them look bad, but because it is emotional.
Yeah.
I mean, think of it's your home. So you want the interview to be equal to what the person is saying. But if it's a month or two after the disaster, they've kind of gotten a little bit calloused, hopefully, and they're not crying every day, but it's still painful. And so my job as a filmmaker is to have you be real about what you're talking about. And you don't always get that. And then, that's the thing. If you're a big company, I can talk to 50 people to get the 5 or 10 good ones. When you're a small company, I can't afford to talk to 50 people. If I talk to 10 people, I got to hope that they're good. And if they're not, that's what makes it less of a good film.
Where did you sort of grow your interviewing skills when you were first sort of getting started in documentary filmmaking? Where did that skill come from?
That's just, I think I grew up with that skill. I was always good at talking to people, and I'm not afraid to ask anything. There's no dumb questions, right? So don't really have that fear factor. I've asked people stupid questions where they've looked at me like I'm an idiot, and that's fine. You know what? So what? That's just the way it goes. So, I'm comfortable asking anybody anything. There are certain things, like when I was making License to Parent, I'm a parent. I was talking to a few children who tried to take their own lives and commit suicide. That's very hard to do. I'm tearing up behind the camera. There wasn't a cutaway camera on me because I don't put myself in the film. But that's emotional and very hard to listen to because it's so, and no parent wants to imagine that would happen with their child.
Yeah, that's terrible.
So that's extremely difficult. And sometimes it is. And then also, like I say, I try to be honest with the person I'm interviewing. In License to Parent, I was talking to a couple who lost their kids because they had a drug problem. So the court took their children away. And I said, look, I want you to understand, in this film, you're going to be portrayed as bad parents that lost their kids because you're drug addicts. I want to make sure you're okay with being seen that way, because that's the story. That's what you will be. Now, it's great that you got them back and you're doing well, and we love that. But still, it's going to be exposed to people who didn't know that about you. And they said, okay, they still wanted to do it. Not all filmmakers care about that. I think a lot of people do if you have humanity. But, you look at some of the stuff that, and I always use this guy as an example because he's so much more successful than me, but I can't stand him, is Michael Moore. The way he'll badger people and get in their face and make the film about him. He's made a lot of money doing it. He's very successful. So there's jealousy on my part saying that, but I also couldn't do that. I don't want to make myself good by making you bad.
Yeah, that's a good point. So now that you sort of have you have a bit of a track record, right? Because now you're making documentary 3, 4, and you'll probably be making many more after that. And I would imagine it gets easier every single time. But a lot of the filmmakers that sort of listen to this podcast are very early stage. So let's sort of go back to the start. Did you create like a little pitch document? Did you create a little 1-minute teaser? How did you sort of really get your boots on the ground for that first documentary?
I cut a little trailer, a little homemade version of a trailer before I had my crew on board. And, you try to really lay the story out so people can see it and understand it. You just have to be prepared for rejection and frustration. And if you're starting out as a filmmaker, find a way to get some footage. If you shoot it with your iPhone in 4K, that's not the same as using a good 4K camera. You're not going to have the depth and the colors and all the things you can do, but it's a really good camera, and people have made movies with that. So you can certainly put together enough stuff to get a trailer, or maybe not your film trailer, but something that's a little bit about your story. And don't be discouraged when people tell you that's not a great idea. The one caution, though, for everybody is, like I say, you're saying I'm making my 3rd and 4th film, but I do not have an easy time fundraising. And that never gets easy. There's some people that are very good at it. When I say I'll talk to anybody, the one thing I'm not good at is sales. I'm good at talking to people, and people love to tell me their personal stories all the time. But if I had to ask you for money and you said to me, nah, George, I'm not interested, A good salesman would just be warming up and go, oh, Deborah, all right, I got you, because 10 more questions and you're going to buy anything I'm selling.
Yeah.
I'm like, if you say no, I go, okay.
Yeah.
That takes me out of being a good salesman. It may make me a nice person.
I know.
But
I think
not a good
exactly
salesman.
this kindness. Unfortunately, sometimes you have to be ruthless. You just have to be like, give me that money.
I need a partner that's ruthless, and I've never had one. I've always partnered with people that were creative types like me, and you don't need that on a team. If you're putting together a team to make a picture, have the ruthless person and pick people that are different skill sets than you.
Yeah.
You don't need a room full of you.
Yeah.
Get other people that do other things. You know, if you have a guy that's a great artist, if you have somebody that's really good with graphics, if you have a musician friend, but the moneymaker friend is the most important one to make, and I don't make those very easily.
Well, it's a good segue into sort of what I wanted to ask about crew, which is a lot of documentary filmmakers in my head are usually like the lone person that is usually doing the camera as well, and maybe there's a little microphone on it and they're asking the questions. How big was your crew when you got started, and sort of how big is it now in comparison?
You know, because they're not big budget films, it's a lean and mean crew. You know, if you maybe get 5 or 6 people sometimes, you know, you want to have one DP. And if you can have a second one with a second camera, that just gives you that much more to work with. So we had 2 videographers on my project. One of them can usually fly a drone. And if you have a drone, that's very helpful to have. It's great if you can have separate sound. If you can have somebody doing sound, but you don't always have that luxury. And so sometimes the DP is also your sound guy. And it's also great if you can have a lighting person, because lighting is, I once went to a shoot where I was with this guy who was one of the most talented videographers I've ever worked with. And this room looked like a dump. And he goes, give me 20 minutes. And he made it look like a freaking palace.
Oh
because
my
if you can
gosh.
light and you can stage things, that's an art. Those are talented people. So if you can cobble that kind of crew together, you're better off, but you might not be able to. A lot of times the DP and the second camera are also lighting. And you have to be honest with them going into the project that says, look, it's a small crew. I'm not going to work you more than 10 hours in the day, but I need you to be able to do multiple things. And then they have the choice of saying they want to or they don't want to.
Yeah. I think if you're upfront with sort of the expectations and the responsibilities, then if they are unhappy later on, that's sort of on them. Especially if you sort of start at the beginning and you're like, this is what it's going to be required of you. Do it.
Yeah, you
Be
want
happy
people
to
with
go
that
on.
spirit.
Yeah.
You can't feel you're too good for it. And they'll see me out there carrying equipment with them. You know, I'm not expecting you to do anything I'm not going to do. I'm not knocking off right when the shoot's done and not helping you. I'm wrapping up cords and packing up lights with the crew because we're all in it together. It's a small team. If somebody's got an idea, I like the freeform idea where sometimes I'm interviewing somebody and when I'm done, sometimes the DP has a question that's great. Sometimes the production assistant might. Well, I don't care whose question it is. If it's a good question, that it helps the whole project. So I think you all have to be kind of selfless when it's a small crew, because if you have tension in a small crew, you're not getting anything done. A large crew, you can fire somebody, move people around, keep people away from each other. When it's a small crew working on a film, you're in it together.
Yeah. Well, what are some of the sort of the biggest challenges that sort of come up maybe over and over each documentary that you make? Is it, and sort of, I think that would be a really handy thing for filmmakers to know. It's like, oh, well, every time I make a documentary, this seems to always go wrong. So it's like, let's plan for this instead. And then you sort of iterate as you go on. Have you faced anything like that?
Yeah, I would say that one thing that's bitten me time and again is when you get to a location and it's not very good for shooting for whatever reason. The room doesn't have good angles. There's no background. You know, you don't have the kind of setting where you can just darken the background and have that fall off behind the person. Ambient sound. You know, we did a great interview outside one time, but there was a fountain 50 yards away, and the mic picked it up, and we could not get rid of that damn fountain. So if you watch, I think it was in Licensed to Parent, there was one interview, we might have ended up not using it. We couldn't get rid of the fountain sound at the time. So you want to be cautious of those things. If somebody's cutting grass across the street from where you're shooting, wait till they're done.
Yeah.
Go find out how long they're going to be and then do your interview.
Yeah.
Because if you figure I'll just take it out in post, Doesn't always work that way, especially on a low budget film. You may not have a crew that can do that as well. And why do you want to spend the time doing that if you can just wait a couple minutes until they stop? We were shooting in New York City one time, and there was not even grass there, and this guy was mowing grass for an hour. We finally had to go over and ask him, could he please go do something else, because he's killing us. If you're right by the street, people like to see a crew shooting and they honk their horns when they drive by, or they race their engine. That can kill it, because if somebody gives you that money line and there's a car going by at 70 miles an hour, it's when you ask them again, it's very hard to get the same magic that they gave you the first time, because they're not actors. It's a person telling a story. And I did an interview one time with a guy. It was a woman. It was for feeding, bringing meals to people, a Meals on Wheels program. And this woman was half blind, very old, and she gave a money soundbite about what we were there for. And the idiot I was working with, and I say idiot because he was an idiot, his phone rang.
Oh, no.
Right in the middle of the best part. And we never got that line. She couldn't do it again if her life depended on it, because it was natural the first time, but she wasn't an actress. So you have to clear this, make this sure everybody's got their phones off, that the focus is there. But the little details that you think you can fix later, it's better if you fix them up front.
I feel like that's story of my life with narrative shorts as well.
Yeah. If the lighting.
Sound is such a killer. It's like people, I think it's like the sound guy is always like the bottom of the pile. They should be really the top. Like without good sound, you've just got a rubbish piece of work. As nice as it might look, it's just like it's so noticeable. People don't pay enough attention to it.
The little Nat sound mic on the front of a camera is not going to sound as good as miking somebody with that $500 microphone or whatever you can come up with. But an individual mic is always better, unless you have a boom that has a really, it really is directional and can hone in on who you're talking to. That's where I've always gotten into trouble. It's always better with a mic. And then you want to make sure that mic's not popping and that there's no interference. I mean, there's so many little things that's where, when you're a smaller crew, somebody's got to be paying attention to that stuff. And when you have more people, you can assign somebody to pay attention to that. When you have a dedicated sound guy, there's no excuse for that happening. When you have two people doing everything, it's easy for that to happen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Things will go wrong.
I'll give you one more example, because you'll appreciate this. I was shooting on the Frio River in San Antonio, Texas, and I did a great stand-up when I was making this travel TV show, and then we get back to the studio, and floating behind me, right when I was saying that, was garbage floating down the river. There was trash.
Oh, God.
Now, unless somebody pointed that out to me while I was talking, how would I have ever known that? And at the time, we didn't have the technology to get rid of that, and that's time and money to clean up a background. So that's where having a quality control person on a set can make a difference. You get what you pay for.
That's right. Well, I wanted to know some quick sort of tips for filmmakers that are getting started in documentary filmmaking. I know we've covered quite a lot already, but if there's something that you wish you had sort of told your younger self before starting on that documentary journey, what would that be?
Partner with somebody who's good at fundraising, because it's hard to do everything. Some people can. There's some people that can do a million things. I like to think I'm a multitasker. I get better at multitasking when I'm on the set or I'm in a pressure situation and all hell's breaking loose. I'm pretty good at steering that straight. But it's the days leading up to it when you have to get the outline for the script. You have to make sure all your releases are in order. You have to have do you need a site release? Do you need to get a license to shoot where you are? All those pieces, it's nice to work with people who can absorb some of that. If you have people that can help you, take advantage of it, unless you're just a machine and can do all that yourself. But it's challenging to do it yourself. It's rewarding when you do it. You look back and go, how did I do that? But if you could have people working with you that can be assets to your team, that's great.
That's amazing. So to wrap up, I'd love to know sort of what you're working on right now. We've already sort of touched on it, but just repeat it again. And then where can people find your work as well, George?
Well, if you go to movetheworldfilms.org, That's the main website where you can link to everything that I do. You can see my podcast on there. You could listen to the podcast. Right at the top of the page, there's a link to our fundraiser there's one film I'm working on that Built to Last, Buyer Beware, that, I hope people just go check it out. If you want to give $10, $25, or just look at it to see how you put together a campaign, maybe you get something out of it that way. That's not my call that I'd like you to do, but I would understand if you do. That's my being a bad salesman.
You got to work on your sales there, George.
I know. Everybody, you need to donate to this film. If you live in a house, if you want to live in a house someday, you need to care about this film, because they're building crap and we have to stop it. Your money can help make a difference. If you can help us get a celebrity voiceover person, if you can help us get some special graphics for this film, we can make a difference. So we need you to donate right after this podcast.
Amazing.
Yeah. And then so the other film is that I said, American Dysfunction, A Picture is an Illusion. You can just reach out to me if you're interested in, hey, I want to invest in a film. I'd love to get behind that, because if we can't improve the strength of family in this country, we're in trouble. It's hard. I have a family that's the branches of my family kind of fell apart when my parents passed on, and people see that all the time. One family member maybe get on drugs. They marry somebody the rest of the family doesn't like. Once the parents are gone, it leaves a power vacuum of who's holding everybody together. Are the kids taking care of the parents when they get older? Which one is doing it? Who is the executor of their estate? There's so many things that nobody thinks about. And our film is going to show people that if you think about these things, you can avoid some of them. And if you can avoid them, you can hopefully hold your family together.
I love that. Thanks so much, George, for joining me on the podcast. It was lovely talking to you, and we'll have to do it again sometime.
Thank you so much for having me. You asked great questions. I appreciate it.
All good. Thank you so much for listening to the Creative Constitution podcast. We hope you've learned something new about documentary filmmaking, and get out there, make your movie, and then invest in George. Talk to you soon.